Hey, what's up guys? Jimmy back with you from Time with Steel. Man, last weekend was the open house. Huge success. Huge, as Donald Trump would say. I can't say it right. But my buddy Chris from Dale County Diesel down in Daleville, Alabama, he gave me crap for never having shirts with no sleeves on in my videos, since I never wear shirts with sleeves. So here you go, Chris. Sleeves are gone. And my white trashness is exposed. But anyways, in between time for working on customer cars, I'm going to pull the blown long block out of this car and swap everything over to that new long block under the bag right there. And if you've been following along, you know I got the Ecoboost almost basically done. The motor ran for about 1 minute and 30 seconds and a cracked ringland ended my day. So pretty much at nighttime when I'm done working on other people's cars, I'm gonna get this done, but I figured I'd show you guys who are considering an Ecoboost swap or kind of wondering how invasive or difficult it is to put in or pull one of these motors. I'm gonna show you how easy it is. And in an effort to keep the video as short as possible, I'm just gonna basically tell you the step that I'm gonna do. Then I'm gonna do that step and then film after the step's done. And I'm gonna go through the whole process until the motor and the trans is pulled as one unit, and then I'm going to swap everything over to the other motor and then put it back in the car. So do me a favor, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and like the video. Based off the metrics I see, there's a whole lot of you out there watching my videos routinely and then aren't subscribing, and it would really help me out. And nothing pisses me off more than having to say that, because I hate videos where they ask you to do that, and now I'm one of them. But I'm trying to get bigger, and it'll definitely help me in the long run. So without further delay, step one, take car, put it on a lift, jack stands, whatever you have, disconnect the battery, get it up in the air. So that's what we're gonna do next. All right, old girl's in the air. So next step for me is I'm gonna drain the oil, and I'm probably not gonna mess with coolant right now. Then I'm gonna get the rear fascia off. I'll come back after the oil's drained. All right, well, the oil is draining and I've already found metal, reflective metal in the oil, so obviously that's not good. Next step is take the rear fascia off. And the way I've got this thing wired, it's 1 bolt to unplug the plug and about 12 bolts on the fascia, and it pops right off. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Boom. Fascia removed, starter wiring and AC compressor wiring all in this plug, 12 bolts. Took me all of about 5 minutes. All right. I don't have the steel bumper on the back of this car. So next thing I'm gonna do, well actually I'll hold on this. Next thing I'm gonna do is pull all the intercooler piping, and then I'll be back. All right, intercooler system is off to include air intake for the turbo. It took about 5 minutes. Next, my custom exhaust. It's just a bolt on the back, and the bolt or the actual clamp on the turbo, and then the exhaust sensor itself, which I'm going to leave installed, and I'll just disconnect with the harness. Okay, another 5-minute job. Exhaust is out. Also, pro tip, I don't care how smart you are, it just makes life easier on the backside. Label every connector you take off the harness. Then if you have harness connectors that are unused like this one, you know exactly which ones you got to put back on. And then for those wondering about the exhaust system, that's it, that's the whole system. O2 sensor, 1 pipe, hanger, T-clamp, gasket, 2 bolts. All right, next step is, let's see what I want to do next here. I think I will go ahead and start draining some of the coolant. I've already drained the front radiator. So I'll drain the coolant, start disconnecting the coolant lines, and go from there. All right, so the easiest place to drain coolant from is the coolant line on the turbo. It's a low point on the block. Try to catch as much as you can. This stuff's expensive. I think there's $100 in coolant in this engine, so I'll never catch all of it. No matter how many buckets I put underneath, I still make a mess. Okay, I drained the coolant. I had pretty much got most of it out, it looks like, when I drained it from the front. I think I got a half a gallon that I saved out of there. But the main feed line of the radiator's out, the heater lines are out. 2 main connections here. I'll try to leave as much stuff connected to the car as I can, so when I put the new motor in, it's a simple reverse process. I've got to label 2 connectors here, your T-map and your boost pressure sensor. And I'm trying to see what I want to do next. Probably going to take the rear frame cross member off and just get better access to some stuff here. All right, I got the rear frame section off. It would be easy to just take the harness and disconnect it from the ECU and pull it with the motor, but just to see if I can, I'm going to try to pull the harness from the engine and lay it over the back firewall. Again, that's my own personal experiment, but for now I'm going to go through and remove as much as the harness as I can gain access to and label it. And once I'm done with that, I'll move on. I'm going to pull the intake and the throttle body just so I have room to not bang things around in there. All right, so as I thought, like, it was actually super easy to remove this harness. There might be 1 or 2 sensors I still got to get to under the intake, but with all my Back to the Future crap and everything, it was easier to just do it this way. And when I put the new motor in, it'll just lay on the motor the way it's supposed to go. Next thing I got to do is disconnect the fuel line to the high pressure fuel pump, which is just a quick release. Then there is a vacuum line here, and then I will pull the intake and throttle body assembly as a whole to make more room and see what else we got under there. All right, intake manifold and throttle body is off. This intake manifold, by the way, is from Auto Mafia Racing. They port and polish it. Super nice. There's 2 spots on the back where the knock sensors mount, and there's also a PCV valve line, the vent system line that connects in the bottom. So you got to remove that hard line right there. Let me see right here. This hard line right here comes off, and you can see it connects there to the back of the intake. Connects right there on the PCV plate, like meow. And then you got your T-map sensor, and you have your 2 knock sensors. There's one here, and then one on the back of the block. Interesting enough, that I learned with these Ecoboost engines, the way you clock those knock sensors matters. And it's not just this engine, most modern engines are like that, but if you mount that knock sensor at 12 o'clock when it's supposed to be at 6 o'clock, for example, like both these knock sensors, this forward knock sensor is supposed to be oriented down to the 6 o'clock, and the rear knock sensor is supposed to be oriented at 3 o'clock. And now you know, and knowing is half the battle. All right, so I definitely prefer doing it this way. It looks like that, you know, War of the Worlds stuff where what is that, Tom Cruise movie where like the red crap grows out of the ground? Well, that's what my engine harness looks like right now. The cool thing is the fuel injection harness itself and the knock sensor harness actually disconnects from the main harness right here. So I'll do the fuel injectors on the other block while I have this one out. And really the only other things that I had to disconnect were the alternator, the starter, which I had done earlier, and I took the opportunity to disconnect my live and grounds from the starter and the alternator. harness is done. It's disconnected from the motor completely, and that took me about, that was the longest thing so far, and I think it took me like 30 minutes just because I had to label everything. We're getting real close now. I'm going to pull the fuel line, and I'm going to start disconnecting my engine mount grounds, which the way I did that, I just have to actually, I don't even have to disconnect those, because the way I did it, they're bolted to the bolts that actually go onto the frame. So once I remove those, they'll take care of themselves. And I really think we're pretty damn close to a cherry picker at this point. I'm gonna have to take the axles off at the Porsche transmission, support the motor with the cherry picker. I'm gonna leave oil in the transmission, and I should be able to start pulling this thing out. Hell, I'll have this thing out tonight. So far, I think I have, what time is it? Let me see what the old time clock when Bobber says. 3:55. I probably have an hour and a half in this so far. And that's with me having to take camera breaks and labeling things. Taking my time because I don't want to scratch anything. So this setup is so super modular, it's awesome. Alright, so I disconnected the oil lines from the external oil plate. Next step is removing axles from the transmission side. That's 6 bolts. And make sure you support the axle with a bungee cord or something. You don't want the axle resting on the race. So before you disconnect that final bolt, support the axle so it's not dangling on its own weight. Alright, axles are disconnected. Next up is those 2 shift linkages right there. Basically one's for reverse and the other one's for all 6 gears. But they both kind of work together. Once those 2 are disconnected, then I'm going to move on to those 2 bolts right there that are holding the trans to the trans mount itself. Alright, transmission mount is disconnected from the frame. I got to pull the bolts off the trans itself, but before I do that, I've got the motor hooked up to a cherry picker. And we're going to unbolt the motor mounts and kind of let the back of the trans fall just a little bit, which is will enable me to get the trans mount completely out to clear the coolant pipes. Then it's going to be a delicate balance of moving the trans. The trans has got to come up about 1 inch to clear the cross member, and then this whole assembly will slide right back out. So I'll go ahead and get the motor mounts disconnected, and then the next time you see this, it's going to be sitting on a pallet, because this is pretty much the second to last step. So something pretty cool, my motor mounts are completely disconnected and the engine didn't tilt forward at all, and that's because I utilized this shelf right here with 1/4 inch steel, and the mount sits right on that shelf on both sides. Now, I'm definitely not the first one to use this kind of idea. Pretty much everyone that's making swaps for these cars is doing that, but it's pretty cool, man. 1/4 inch steel mounts and sitting right on that pad. The motor didn't move at all when I took the bolts out. Now I'll go ahead and lift up with the cherry picker, or drop the lift down and leave the cherry picker where it's at, and we'll be pulling this bad boy out. Well, there you have it, folks. The only thing I forgot was the clutch line. I had to disconnect the clutch line, and you got to be careful with the shift cables because they index inside of these little fingers here. And the way it fits so tight in there, you've got to lower the trans a little bit to clear the frame, pop the shifter cables out, and then out she comes. That took me about 2.5 hours of chilling, listening to music, stopping to take videos for you guys, and that was by myself. So to those of you that think this is complicated, I actually think it's easier to get this out of the car than a stock Delorean trans and engine. So anyhow, hope you enjoyed watching. If you didn't, then tough. I'm just kidding. But stay tuned, and hopefully you enjoy the next one. See you next time. Peace.